Welcome to the Powercat Podcast, the original K-State sports show. Here's your host, Tim Fitzgerald.
Welcome to another edition of the Powercat Podcast. I am Fitz. Ryan Gilbert and Brien Hanley are beside me this week. I meant to be in the middle, Gills, but you look just adorable in the middle. They're all short and wearing your all black 24/7. What company do you work for? 24/7?
Yeah,
I can't tell which one.
Not even with this, the background too.
I know. Very confusing. I am sleep deprived. The political junkie that I am stayed up almost all night. And I don't want to talk about it just because we got other things to talk about. We got bigger issues at Kansas State. It's called running the football and winning football games. You might notice something different about this podcast. It's been time to change our sponsor. So if you're interested in sponsoring our podcast, step on up, give me a shout on social media, or you can email me at lifeoffitz@gmail or fitz@gopowercat.com. Might be easier. Fitz, F-I-T-Z @gopowercat.com. If you are interested in sponsorship opportunities here with this show and other ones, we've got other open opportunities, including the Big 12 Insiders. If you got a national business, come talk to me. I don't know who does, Big B. Well, why don't we have a lot of friends with huge national businesses?
Exactly.
I know. Let's get going with your questions from Wabash Station. I hope he's picked them out because he's in charge of that. Here's Gills.
I don't know if you were anticipating any hoops talk, but I don't think there was a single basketball question. So it's all football, even though basketball season's underway. So that's what the people wanted, right?
Yeah.
But first question, something I have to say to Fitz every time we're in a hotel room together, is from Don't Touch My Willie. Were the expectations for this team too high?
Right, go.
I don't know if they were necessarily too high. But I don't disagree with that question. I think when you're breaking in a brand new offensive line, even though guys had experience, it's not the same. You're bringing in a brand new quarterback who started one game prior to this. I think the expectations of people thinking that, we were going undefeated, we're definitely going to the Big 12 championship game. Maybe it was a little bit out of whack. There were still question marks for me anyway. And I said it at the beginning of the year, the offensive line's got to be right. Now you look at the season, we can nitpick at a few games and say, well, they haven't been great. And the secondary hasn't been great, but I just think it's one of those years, guys, where we wanted to go to the Big 12 title, and don't get me wrong, we can still get there. All of that is not out of the question. Obviously this was a horrific loss to Houston, but all of that is not out of the question. So let's not, just bury this season just yet. Having said that, I think the expectation may be a little bit too high, considering what was so brand new with this football team.
Well, I'll just say this. If you pick Kansas State to go 12-0 or even 11-1, maybe you did have expectations too high.
Yeah.
They're 7-2 with an opportunity to win all three games. Certainly, I'm going to agree with you. If they lose one of these two at home, maybe expectations were too high. But if they end up even 9-3, I heard a lot of people say this team would be 9-3. So maybe the Houston game wasn't one you expected to lose, but I also think coming into the season, we thought if they do go 9-3, they're going to lose a game nobody expects them to lose. And here we are. If they go 8-4, if they lose two more games, I'm in on that. But I think they'll rest and regroup and be a pretty good football team a week from Saturday. They need to do some soul searching. They need to make some changes. I've done some daily deliveries on that with a famous quote about just finding plays from other teams you played. I think I said it was just steal shit, which is, kind of my overall overriding philosophy about life. If you don't have what you need, go get it. But no, I think they can make the changes. They can get back to what they need to do. They need to find some new stuff And why they don't have that already installed, I don't know, but here we are. I'm still not over what happened at Houston because I still can't fully explain it. And but they're 7-2. Yeah, I mean, they need some help now to get to the Big 12 championship, but I don't think any of us expected them to be in the position that they were in, that they could win out and go to the championship game before that loss. And this is kind of a more realistic position where I think we thought they would be at this point of the season.
Yeah, and in the way that Kansas State lost to BYU with how things unraveled, and then just kind of the lethargic performance at Houston makes it seem like this is not a 7-2 team. It seems like it's worse than that, but at the end of the day, there's only 2 L's on that schedule, and so it's an unwritten book for the rest of the year, like you talked about, Big B. So just with only 2 losses, I don't think the expectations, this is kind of on par of where it should be. It's just the way that K-State's loss makes it kind of just in our minds maybe feel worse than it might actually be. But, you know, Avery Johnson, like you said, Big B, he's only made 1 start coming into this year. You've got a new play caller on offense, so many question marks at wideout, you know, a lot of new pieces on the offensive line. You can go down the list. And I think there was just so many unknowns for this team. So while the ceiling was high, like really high for this team, if all things clicked, I think maybe, you know, myself included, people just didn't include the or think about the, you know, what if factor. What if this person's not as good as we think? What if that part of the offense isn't as good as we think? And that's why it seems like it's a disappointing year. But in all reality, with only 2 losses here on November 6th, as we're recording this, it's not bad.
No, and I think you kind of mentioned it, you know, the way that we lost, and it's also who we lost to. You know, if Iowa State, if we'd have lost to Iowa State last week, people wouldn't be so, oh man, the expectations weren't great. But we lost to Houston, and it's a bad loss. You can't hide from that. And that's why people are believing that maybe, and myself included, I even said it, maybe the expectations were a little bit too high for this team, you know, because we lost to a Houston. Now, I think Houston's a little better than maybe what a lot of people gave them credit for, but let's not kid ourselves. That's not a game. K-State should have won that game by double digits, and they didn't. So that's why we're getting these questions, and people believe that. But it happens sometimes.
Yep.
From K-State, Fort Hays State dad, who is, or do we have a true leader on this team? Who is the guy in the locker room that takes control or during the game? It doesn't appear that we have an Arthur Brown, Colin Klein, Kobe Savage type. It's great to have humble players, but we need a guy.
I think there's some truth to that, Big B. When you were playing, if the offense wasn't performing the way it should, did Michael Bishop have anything to say about that?
Yeah, he had a little bit to say about that. I mean, we were all pretty old when I was there, so we were pretty experienced, but no, we had a definite leader for sure. And you got to have one.
Yep. And that doesn't mean I'm faulting Avery. He's a sophomore. He's a young kid. I don't fault him, but I do think there's a sense that a lot of the leaders are, you know, the Austin Moores and Hadley Panzer guys, the guys you'll listen to, but you don't really fear. You don't get that fire from it. I would imagine. You just need someone to really get after you, whether it's a quarterback or someone else. And maybe that person's on the team and we don't know it, but this team at times looks to me like it doesn't have that kind of inspirational, let's go kick their ass leader. It just seems that's how they play at times. And they've done it both times. They've gone to the Gulf area. They stunk at Tulane and escaped with a win, and they stunk at Houston and couldn't find a way out of that mess. They just don't seem to have game. They seem to have games that they just have no inspiration. They have no fire in their belly. And if you do anything in life without passion, it's not going to turn out the way you'd want it to. You got to get after it.
Yeah, I totally agree. You got to have a leader of some sort. And and it's also a leader for the entire football team. You know, obviously you want your quarterback to be that, but at 20 and just turning 20, it's tough. especially if you don't know how to do that, if you've never done that before, because it's one thing to be a leader of a high school football team. It's another thing to be a leader of men. And when you get into college, you're a leader of men. That's who you're leading mostly, is men. It's tough. It's not the same. But again, somebody also has to understand that on that football team and take the reins. That's where I think the lack of that passionate leader comes from, is that somebody's got to be mature enough to understand, hey, our quarterback is technically the quasi leader of the team, but he just turned 20 years old. I got to be that guy. I got to be his voice. I have to be the mouthpiece to be able to get this message out. I'm not in the locker room, so I'm not going to say who is and who isn't. And I think that's premature for maybe people to say, but you can look at the games. You can look at the sidelines. You can see what's going on there, and you can tell who the leader is, who's firing guys up on the sideline. And it's got to be more than just rah-rah stuff. Okay, guys are way more mature to fall for just rah-rah, yay, yay. Nobody wants to hear that. We need a clear and a real message.
You guys remember 2020, right? Forgettable season, and I'm not implying that this is what the locker room was like, but that's the risk you run if you kind of have a quote unquote player run or player led program. That has its risks, right? I'm not saying at all that Kleiman's lost this locker room, but Bruce Weber's a very extreme example of it. But you give him a nice, healthy, functioning locker room, he wins titles. And when it's not, we see the very bad, the ugly of that. So that's obviously kind of just the risk that you run with having a locker room that is led and ran by your players. Whether that's good or bad, I'm not saying one way or another, but that's just the risk you run.
Gills, I agree with you. And I think we're finding out there is some locker room stuff going on. It's not nearly what it was in 2020, but it can be a distraction around, certain personalities. So we're digging into that to see how bad it is. But I don't know. Even if you have locker room problems, guys can go out and play angry.
Absolutely.
And they just don't. I said this on another podcast. It was the Insiders. I don't understand how you work your ass off year round to play 12 games for sure, maybe 13, 14 or more, but 12 games for sure, and then kind of mail in your effort on a game or two.
Yep.
What have you been doing all the work for? This is the payoff. I'm going to be really honest. If you're a football player and you can't get up for 12 games and you put in that much of work, you're wasting your time.
Yep.
Just go be a student. Go get a degree, because you're not going to go anywhere past college. And maybe it's cool being on the football team and you get chicks and stuff, but you are dedicating so much of your life to this endeavor. How do you not fully dedicate yourself 12 Saturdays in the fall? I can't wrap my mind around it.
No, me neither, Fitz. It's, and again, I'm not saying this team specifically has that issue. I think this is more of and people will get mad at me for this. I don't care. It's more of a cultural thing. You don't have to like each other in the locker room. And do you think a football team, everybody got along with everybody? No, people don't even hang out. Look, I was on a football team. I didn't hang out with all the other offensive linemen. Those guys were not, they weren't my friend peers. I didn't hang out with those guys. I hung out with defensive guys because that's who I got along with. And it wasn't that I disliked them. They just weren't my best friends. Having said that, you don't even have to like the guys in your locker room. You don't, but you have to respect them. And you have to respect them enough to go out there and bust your ass. That's all you have to do. So, again, I'm not saying that that's what's going on with this team. But if it is, somebody, again, has to be mature enough. And maybe it's a coach to just say, hey, guys, you don't have to like each other, but you got to respect each other to go out there and play as hard as you can.
Gilbert
and you
doesn't like me.
Losing.
Gilbert doesn't like me. And he comes here and he podcasts hard, man. He gets after it.
But I respect you. That's all that matters, right, Big B?
There you go.
Hold on. Do you respect Big B?
No, I respect both of you, but
you. Okay. Got scared there for a second.
This is going to be kind of a 2-1 just because I think they're kind of go hand in hand. From Adam K63, did this team peak in Colorado? And then from El Camino Cat, for the past 3 weeks, we have struggled in the running game. Is this more of a result of defenses committing to take it away, or our offense failing to execute?
Well, I think they played their best game of the season at Colorado. It doesn't necessarily mean they peaked, but I've been talking about this since Colorado. There was a great deal of emotional and physical investment in that Colorado game. That Colorado team's really good. And as much as those idiots want to say we were your Super Bowl, no, you were a good team on a schedule. There's no shame in saying that you were less invested than Kansas State, because that's what you're saying. Kansas State won that game. They were beat up and tired as they went to West Virginia. We knew that. We saw that. And honestly, Garrett Green getting injured right before half made that a much easier game than it probably should have been. That's another night road game. You can come home for your rivalry game at night and have to fight for survival to get the win. This team has slowly unwound the last 4 weeks, and it looks like just physical and mental deterioration over this month-long period. And I think the off week now comes at a good time, but kind of wish it had been last week where they didn't have to lose for us to realize that they were unwinding slowly. But it is what it is. And I can't remember the other part of the question, but that's where I'm at.
Running the last 3 games.
Oh, well, they're just not adapting to what teams are doing.
Yeah.
That's coaching, man.
Yep.
They're just not adapting to what the defense are presenting. They should have plenty of stuff in their playbook. When they do this, we do that. And they seem to be saying, well, if they do this, we're going to do what we've always done, even though it won't work. And I can't wrap my mind around it.
No, I think I think they played their best game. I'll agree with you, Fitz. They played their best game. I don't think that means you peaked. It just means that happened to be the best game at that time of the year. I think there's plenty more left in the tank. And they just needed a bye week. The Colorado game, while it was physical and emotional, it was taxing because, look, guys were geared up for that because they understood, look, their social media is around now. They understood how many people were going to be watching and invested in that football game. They were up for that thing. And when you don't play like that, or you don't have that many eyeballs every single week, that can take a lot out of you. You know, it's just the human nature. But yeah, it's too bad they had to lose a football game to realize that. And I really do believe they'll bounce back the next 3 games. But as far as the running, I've said it on 2 different podcasts. I'll say it again today. Teams have taken away exactly what K-State wants to do in between the tackles. Fitz is 1,000% correct. We have to make an adjustment. You have to get the ball to the edge, whether it's option, tosses, outside zones, whatever it is. But I do say this, Fitz. I think the problem is this line isn't as athletic. I know people are going to say, well, yeah, the guy running 21 miles an hour as an offensive lineman. Yeah, that's fine. But that doesn't have anything with you running laterally and having to block somebody. That's what's being athletic. There are plenty of fast people that are not athletic. So when I mean athletic, getting out in space, blocking guys that are quicker than you, more athletic than you, smaller than you, more agile than you, but still being able to get out there and block them. This line, I'm not sure that's their strength. I'm positive it's not that's their strength. And we're not calling those plays. But just like you said, Fitz, if teams are going to take away what you do well inside, at some point you have to do something different. Otherwise, it's just not going to work. And Kansas State, the last 3 games have just said, well, okay, we're just going to continue to do it, and it's just not going to work. And until they make a change, I don't see anybody doing anything different. Give me 7 guys, cover up both guards in the center. We'll drop a safety down, put 8 in the box, do something different. And until you do, it's a problem.
Agreed.
Speaking of the Houston game, Fitz, I think you should be the motivational speaker for this team. The K-State got up for Colorado. They lived for that game. That's what college football is all about.
It was after an off week too. So
yeah. So Houston nobody was there. It was rainy. So I think that's a motivational thing, right? With Colorado, K-State wasn't ready for that game. And if you, like Fitz, you're saying, if you're the coaching staff, maybe they didn't do a good enough job relaying to those players that, maybe this isn't as glamorous as playing Deion Sanders in primetime under the lights, but this is still college football. You only get X number of these opportunities in your lifetime. So Fitz, that's a side gig I think you could maybe take on. But in the presser after the Houston loss, I forget who asked about K-State was up 19-10 and they throw the interception, and Kleiman had correct me if I'm wrong, Fitz, a somewhat snarky answer. Like, we couldn't run the football, so of course we had to throw. It was like, well, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking maybe change things up with the run, right? So this kind of leads into the next question here. I'll let you guys finish before we get into that.
That's not even the answer. The answer is you run the football as best you can, and then you punt.
Correct.
I agree.
Sometimes the best play you can run is a punt. That is you're up 2 scores.
Yep.
You're up 2 scores. And it was 2nd and 8. It wasn't like it was 3rd and long. It was 2nd and 8 when they put the ball in the air. You get to 3rd and 5, you get to 4th and 3, and you punt. It's the same philosophy that coaches tell quarterbacks, hey, look, don't force the ball. Just throw it out of bounds. We'll punt and we'll reorganize.
Yeah.
Same thing, but this time with the running game. Let's not make the mistake that they need. Correct. What's the most impactful thing we can do with this game other than break a long run or, hit that home run offensively, which wasn't going to happen in the rain? Not turn the ball over. That's the best thing you can do to win the game. And they put themselves in a position to do so. They would have been better off kneeling 3 times and punting than trying to throw the ball in those conditions. I'm baffled by it. I don't get it. And I think this was Chris Kleiman's, trying to explain why exactly his coaching staff made this decision. And the explanation didn't work for me. You punt the ball. If you can't pick it up without putting the ball in peril, can pick up a first down, you punt.
Yeah.
Don't be scared to punt once in a while, particularly when you're in control of the damn game and you give it away. I'm never going to understand that series of plays.
Complementary football. At some point, you have to play that. They teach that's coaching 101, man. You got to play complementary football. You're up 2 scores in a driving monsoon. Oh, by the way, you're playing bad, but you're still up 2 scores. Just go punt the football. They can't do anything on offense unless you give them momentum to do it. Well, you gave them momentum. You didn't have to. Just get out of there. We're playing bad. Get out of there. That's all you should have been thinking about, is how can we get out of here fast enough? So I don't know.
If Houston scores a touchdown and makes it 19-17, I'm still in punt mode. Run the football, punt, and then once you're down, if Houston can prove that without aid from a turnover to score back-to-back touchdowns or something and take the lead, then sure, then you got to start to sling it. But I would bet a lot of money that, like, genuinely,
it wasn't going to happen.
If K-State just kneeled it for the final, it was into the 4th quarter at this point, man. They just kneeled it and punted it, they'd probably win.
Well, and let's keep this in mind. Houston on their next series after scoring off the short field does break a long run, something they hadn't done the entire game. And let's be really transparent here, Ryan Gilbert. I was in the restroom when this happened. But the explanation that, we kind of brought the heat and they hit a gap. So again, you're up and you're gambling in ways that could really help your opponent.
It wasn't even that. It was that. They gambled, brought a 0 safety blitz, a run blitz, and the safety fell down. The guy cuts back to an open gap, and there was nobody there to make the tackle. I have no idea why. I get selling out to stop the run, but you don't have to bring everybody. We did, and all it took was one guy to fall down, and that's what happened. And
someone fell down on bad footing. Go figure.
We had a question about that. I didn't include it.
I just want an explanation. How come K-State always looks like the worst team when it comes to bad footing games? Houston didn't have problems with footing. Iowa State didn't have problems with footing in the snow last year. I don't get it. Something's gone wrong. Is that it for the first half?
There's one more. It's from KSU Burke 54.
Hey, come on, Burke.
What's worse right now, the play calling or the execution? Kind of what we've been talking about.
Oh, they go hand in hand, man. But the play calling, it's like you've been dating that interior running game for a while, and now you got dumped, but you keep sending flowers to the interior running game. And now it's become pathetic because there might be some stuff on the outside that works and gets you to where you need. And when you're in a relationship with running the ball, the goal is to score. But your girlfriend broke up with you, so you're not scoring with the interior running game. You got to score maybe getting off tackle or doing some creative stuff in the running game. It's all about scoring, fellas.
Is Cole? I feel like you're Cole right now with all your metaphors, or what are those called? Analogies,
metaphors, stupidisms. That's me. So I'm doing. I just equated a running game to. Never mind.
Yeah, I agree. They go hand in hand. Obviously, I would say the execution is worse because you can still execute the plays. Now, granted, there's stuff that you got to call the right plays. Don't get me wrong. You can't just be stubborn and just say, okay, we're going to continuously run it up the middle when they got 50 million guys in there. Okay, I get that. But at the same time, Kansas State has to be a team that, you know what, if we need 4 yards, we need to be able to go get 4 yards. And I know Houston's defense is pretty good, but at some point, you got to be able to do that. Also, at some point, I would say, look, I know you have a young quarterback. He's got to be able to check out of a bad play and get you into another one. So, you know, I know he's young, but nobody's confusing Avery with being stupid because he's a smart kid. So allow him to count, because that's all you have to do in the run game. All you have to do is be able to count. You don't have to do a whole bunch of other stuff. If you can count, hey, there's more guys on this side than we have blockers. We need to run the other direction. Pretty simple stuff, not complicated. And so maybe that's part of the progression during the bye week that they're going to put in there. But at some point, that's going to have to be part of this if we're still going to try to run the ball. Just flip it to the other side and continue and run it that way. Do something different. So, but they do go hand in hand.
Yeah, I know Wally touched on this, but you've got guys running wrong route. Who's that on exactly, and whose fault is that? Who knows? But guys are not blocking on. Was that Jace Brown or Keegan? When it's just you go. I mean, Avery's pick, right? There's so many plays. The offensive line had missed assignments, and so. Of course, the play calling was bad, but my initial gut reaction was that the execution was worse than what the collective kind of fan base thought.
And Chris Kleiman came to the post game and said that we're not executing. We got to get back to our fundamentals. And someone said, "Oh, he's throwing his players under the bus." No, it's called being held accountable. The blocking and tackling in that game were awful. Blocking and tackling. Remember last basketball season when I couldn't understand how a team of guys that made it to major college level couldn't dribble and pass. Blocking and tackling. If you're not doing that well, and Pop Warner or the NFL, you're going to lose. You got to have good fundamentals, period. And right now, this offensive line isn't very physical. They're not sustaining blocks. And heaven help us if receivers would actually put some effort into blocking downfield, maybe some of these runs would go the distance. But no, they just kind of dance until the runner gets there, and then they'll let their guy go tackle him. It's absolutely infuriating to watch, and it happens over and over.
Yeah. One of the things that I would say is, I know you mentioned throwing the players under the bus. Well, Coach Kleiman wasn't doing that because who do you think is teaching these guys to tackle and block? It's the coaches.
Right.
So maybe that was his indirect way of telling the coaches, hey, man, let's go. Get your ass in gear. We got to do a better job of coaching these guys up on the basic stuff. And I would be willing to say, look, I haven't been to a practice, not going to a practice, don't need to be invited to a practice. But if you're telling me that these guys aren't working on fundamentals every single day, well, if they aren't, that's a big problem. But I'd find that hard to believe that they're not. I'd just find it stances, starts, right foot, left foot, chopping your feet as far as linemen. Same thing with receivers, just all across the board. If they're not working at least 1 to 2 periods a day on just basic fundamentals, I would find that hard to believe. But maybe they just have to be coached harder.
Agree. That it, Gills?
That is all we got.
Okay, that's it for the first half of the Powercat podcast. We'll be back on the other side with more of your questions from Wabash Station, because everyone gets to listen to this podcast or watch it, but only our VIPs that go Powercat get to put the questions in. It's a pleasure. It's a gift. It's something really cool they get to do for themselves to help us out. I'm going to stop talking. None of this makes sense. I'm tired.
We'll be right back after these messages from our sponsors. Welcome back to the show. Let's head back to the studio.
Welcome back to the Powercat Podcast. Fitz and Gills and Big B answering your questions from Wabash Station. And we continue now with part 2 of this incredible episode of Babbling Fitz and his 2 sidekicks. That's your cue, Gills. Now you go.
Hey, he wouldn't be a good actor, would he, Fitz? Lord have mercy, he's missing his cues.
I know.
The no sponsor thing is throwing me off in my defense.
I know. That's weird.
Longer than that. But from claws out, balls out. Does a Chris Kleiman coached team have a capped ceiling?
No. Let me stare into the camera and say this. It's not easy to win 11 or 12 games in a regular season. It's not easy to win 10. He's winning 8 or 9 pretty consistently. Don't complain about that, because the opportunity will come to have that 11 or 12 win season. I think early in this season, we began to recognize that we've got some issues here, but they've been taping it up and getting it done. And the off week helped them prepare for Colorado. Now this off week better help them prepare for 3 weeks, because that's what they need to do. But no, I don't think there's a ceiling. I don't accept that. What I think the problem is you don't have the talent yet at Kansas State to go win the bad days. You don't. I mean, everyone loses games once in a while. You can't explain, except for those teams that are so much more talented that they basically can't lose. And that gap's getting tighter and tighter in this current environment of the transfer portal. So, no, I don't think there's a ceiling here. I truly don't. But I also think outside of a pandemic, there's been a pretty good floor that means you're going to a bowl game every year. The greatest thing Bill Snyder did wasn't turning it around. That was pretty incredible. The greatest thing he ever did was make K-State fans believe winning is easy, because it's not. It never has been. He was a masterful tactician. He would do the things that Willie Fritz did. My team stinks. My team is awful. But we're only down 9 early in the fourth quarter. Let's press the issue and try to get a turnover. What Willie Fritz did was very Snyder-like. Willie Fritz was the player of the game, period. And Chris Kleiman is a whale of a coach, but at times he gets out tacticianed in situations like that. Why? Because he came from a program that could have bad days and win. He came from a program where he didn't have to manage timeouts at the end of the game because they were ahead. And he came from a program that played indoors. So he didn't have to manage weather conditions very often unless they were on the road. I don't know. He's a different coach than Bill Snyder. He's got his pluses, he's got his downs, but boy, don't complain about going to a bowl game every year not being good enough if you're a Kansas State fan. Now, nobody wants a championship and maybe a playoff more than myself. But I'm not going to be upset that a team with a true sophomore quarterback is going to end up possibly 9-3 in the regular season. Yeah. I'll take it.
I mean, just look at it this way. Just go up the road, I-70 could be Kansas. Think about what Kansas is doing. Everybody talks about Lance Leipold being this great coach. Look what the kind of season they're having this year. You could be Nebraska. Look at Nebraska. Everybody thought Nebraska was going to be good this year and this and that. Nebraska probably isn't going to win another game this season. That would mean they're not going to go to another bowl game, and they are an absolute disaster again. So before we go jumping off the deep end thinking, well, this team has a ceiling and this program and this coach has a ceiling, we could be those programs, and we are not. I also want to remind people we're only 2 years away of being removed from winning a Big 12 championship game, a title. So I just, keep it in perspective. We're all disappointed. There's probably nobody more disappointed than me because I take that back. The kids and coaches, people, they're more disappointed than me. But I'm always pretty hard on K-State, and I don't allow for people and Fitz knows this about me. I don't allow for the woe is me K-State fan. I don't allow for any of that because I believe we can be that program if we want to be. I just don't stand for that. Having said that, there's also a flip side to that. We could be worse. So don't think that while it was a bad game, let's keep it in perspective. We could be Kansas. We were Kansas. I mean, we could be that. We could be having the same type of season that Kansas has right now. Kansas has a ton of talent, supposedly a great coaching staff, and they've won 2 football games. I mean, so we're not there. We couldn't be Nebraska. Just think about that. We could be Nebraska. How bad Oklahoma is Nebraska, man? And it's funny because we all laugh at Nebraska. This is what you signed up for. This is what you get. And I think it's great. But we could be that, and we are not that, people. We are not that.
Yeah. What about Oklahoma, Big B?
No, don't get me started on OU. Yeah. OU gets the pick of the litter. You talk about schools that get top talent. OU still gets top talent. Top talent. And look where they are. I mean, I'm just saying, and I get it, and I'm a Brent Venables guy. I like him, but he's not going to get fired because they just signed him to a huge contract, and I'm not saying he should either. Got to give him time to get it figured out, but Lord have mercy, we could be that, and we're not, people. We're not. It'll get better. I mean, just give it a little patience. These last 3 games, let's see what happens. Let's just see what happens.
Bills?
Yeah, I mean, not only just with Chris Kleiman, but facilities, recruiting, they're getting Lincoln Cure and Avery Johnson. And, there is no reason year in and year out that Kansas State won't have at least a fair and equal chance to win the Big 12. I think the only thing that with this question, being capped, like, I don't think K-State could compete with the Georgias of the world right now, but within the Big 12 to get into the college football playoff and win the league year in, year out, K-State's going to have at least a chance to do that really every year under Kleiman, in my mind.
Right.
I mean, but we say, I'm sorry, Fitz, we say that they can't compete with the Georgias and the Alabamas and the Ohio States of the world. We saw Kentucky take Georgia to the wire. We saw Vanderbilt. Now, Vanderbilt's having a pretty good season this year, but I would be venture to say Kansas State is better than Vanderbilt. I'm not going to apologize for saying that. They would beat Vanderbilt. They beat Alabama and physically whipped Alabama. It wasn't just some fluke game, where they played great and Alabama played horrible. They physically whipped them. So the parity in college football is a real thing. Kansas State's caught right in the middle of that. We're there, people. Is it going to take a little bit? Maybe we got to get over the hump. Yes, I go, but we're there, man. We are there.
I mean, this is a season that if you look around the neighborhood in which you live, the top teams were supposed to be one group.
Yeah.
And Kansas State is still in the group of top teams.
Exactly.
But most everyone else isn't. So I kind of got this thing that I understand frustrations. I understand they should not have lost that game, particularly in the way they did. But Oklahoma State and Utah, some people thought they'd play for the conference championship. They may not make it to bowl games. I mean, it's just hard for me to get overly distressed, like this is somehow the end of all things good that you lost a road game at Houston. It was a colossal screw up in all ways, but it's not the end of the world. They get to regroup and take an off week and go play back-to-back home games against pretty good teams and prove themselves. If they start losing those games, I'm with you, but I'm not there yet.
From claws out, balls out. Let's revisit this question. Excuse me. Have we seen enough evidence now that we are just plugging guys into the offense rather than creating it around the players?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Ryan Wallace brings this up. We were under the impression, and not just from our own imagination, from what we were being told, that they would design things to get specific players in specific situations to put them at an advantage. I don't think we've seen that. DJ Giddens got to be so good that just handing the ball off to him and building everything around him, even if it was West Virginia taking it away, they still surrendered the passing game to K-State. That's been so easy to do. They never had to get creative. They better get creative now, and they better, as I mentioned in that daily delivery, everyone's job should be on the line. They've just got a couple guys that I think are good players, but continue to make mistakes and stay on the field, while other guys who make big plays and might make mistakes, but not as dramatic as we're seeing these notable boneheaded plays. And those guys aren't playing as much. I don't play the guys that are going to do their jobs well. Maybe they're steps slower. Maybe they're a little bit less experienced, but if they're going to come with passion and understand how to do their job, I'll take it.
Yeah. I mean, they're definitely just plugging and playing, and it's frustrating. I think every K-State fan out there is trying to figure out why Dylan Edwards can't get more touches on a Saturday. It's amazing to me why we just can't figure out a way to get him isolated on a running or on a linebacker one-on-one or just out in space in general, because you can't dictate whether a team's going to play man or zone, but you can dictate getting the kid the ball out in space and more than 5 to 8 times a game. You can do that. But they just haven't,
You have your bubbles popping up on your screen again.
I don't know. The bubbles like me. But
he's drinking
I don't know. I don't know exactly what. I just don't understand the reasoning, because the offense, be honest with you, doesn't look any different. I know we've made changes over the years, offensive coordinators and this and that. But it literally just doesn't look any different. But I'll come back to this, guys. I really believe that it might be the limitations of maybe what our offensive line can actually do. And people don't want to just say that out loud, but I'll say it out loud. And it's not a knock. It's just the truth. And maybe it's the limitations of what they can do. And if they can't block in space, you can't call plays in space. So.
No, that might be exactly it.
From Don't Touch My Willie, is Kleiman loyal to a fault? He has exclusively promoted from within to the coordinator positions, and I think he plays seniors over younger talent too much. Loyalty is great, but too much can be a fault.
Maybe. Look, I haven't disagreed with. I'm not against Connor Riley being an offensive coordinator. It's just not there yet, and that's unfortunate. But yeah, I can see that. You could probably make an argument that was the time to go get some outside thoughts on offensive football instead of just staying in the house. And I thought that was happening with Matt Wells, but I haven't really noticed anything that transformative that he's added to the playbook that hasn't been there before. So yeah, maybe, but if you're not loyal to players, if you literally stab people in the back because it's best for your program and they leave, well, then maybe you're not managing the program the right way either. It's not an easy thing to say, do you promote him or do you go outside? Because both have failings and both have positives. And it's just, there's not a magic bullet in hiring anyone. Brent Venables, by all accounts, should be a great head coach. He's not. So you just don't know what you're going to get when you promote or hire people.
Well, also, I think another thing is that Coach Kleiman, I think, wants to have more control than what he says or allows as far as the offense is concerned. And what I mean by that is I want a certain offense run, and that's the way. I don't want it to be all over the place. I don't want it to throw the ball 50 times a game and spread everybody out and do all these other things. While we might show a ton of formations, we still want to run the ball in between the tackles. And maybe that's his way of having control over that. I don't know that to be the case. I know what I watch and see, and it seems to be that, yeah, we have a ton of formations, different personnel groups, all that kind of stuff, but it seems to be the same plays over and over and over again. So I don't know. That being loyal to a fault is a real thing. I don't think it's necessarily cost us a whole lot, but I just know that the offense just doesn't look different. And, we can say whatever we want. It just doesn't look different. And as far as defense is concerned, I would say the same thing. Part of that's players, part of that's personnel, and what you can and can't do. But it just doesn't look a whole lot different is all I'm going to say, especially on the offensive side of the football. The formations are cute. Personnel packages are great, but it's still the same play. And I know a lot of people, look, I've watched football my whole life, so I'm able to decipher between all of that. So, and it's, to me, that stuff is just fluff. But sometimes you got to run other stuff and just do it and see what happens. That's all.
I'll keep this short and sweet, but look at Courtney Messingham, right? If I'm not calling for Connor Riley's firing, but if it continues for years or games, whatever, Kleiman's not just going to stick with him forever, right? So Kleiman, while he may be too loyal, sure, he knows when if something's not working out, he's got to pull the plug. So, yeah, maybe a little bit. I think we're all, Fitz still has me around, right? He's too loyal to let me go, but you know what? It is what it is, right?
It's very disappointing.
Last question is from Doug142. How many pros are on this team? According to Big B, the 97-98 team had 15 pros. I counted about 11 who are or likely to be pros from the 2022 team. I think that I got to about 6 on this team. Is this a fair assessment, or is this team too young to know how good they are?
Yeah, there's a layer of that. I mean, we still don't know if Avery's a pro. He's pretty small. So, I mean, I question that. I think there's some linemen that are pros, but you're right. Who is a pro off this team? And we can't answer that right now. You only get to answer that 5 years, 10 years down the road, because some of those guys might be freshmen and they're just not ready to play at this level. They will be later. So I'm not sure. But at the end of the day, if you got more horses, you're going to go faster. And coaching is like having the jockey. So you need a little of both to succeed at Kansas State.
Yeah, that's the difference between Kansas State and, the bigger programs. Those guys get guys that could go, well, they're not physically ready to play at the next level because they're not strong enough maybe, but athletic-wise, they could make it. And that's where the difference comes in. So like Avery, for instance, I think Avery athletic-wise, he could be a quarterback in the National Football League, but he's a little guy. He's got to get bigger. He also doesn't throw it well enough to be a professional quarterback right now. Is there some linemen? Look, if I've been talking this whole podcast about linemen having limitations blocking outside, if that's the case, yeah, they're not playing in the National Football League. I can assure you of that. But again, I think it's a little bit of you don't know because, again, while I might be 21 years old or 22 years old, I don't really get into my full grown man maturity until I'm 25 to 27 years old. So, things can happen later in life. You don't have to be a finished product by 18. That's why I can't stand the NBA, is because they believe if you're 19 years old and you're not in our league, somehow you're not any good. Where you had a guy like Tim Duncan that played 4 years in college and he turned out to be okay, huh? So I don't know. I think there's probably some. I don't know how many. But there's probably a few. I don't even want to put a number on it because, again, I'm with you, Fitz. I think you don't really know because we're a young football team, but there's some pros on this team.
Yeah.
There definitely is some pros on this team.
Well, let's take Mott. Brendan Mott as an example. He's certainly not big enough to be a defensive end. Can he make the adjustment to, an outside linebacker in a 3-4? I don't know. If he can, he's going to be a pro.
Correct.
So
correct.
That one's,
I like Brendan Mott. The thing about him, he's not, because first of all, I'm not saying that he could never gain the weight to be a defensive end, because look at me. I mean, anybody can put on weight. He can put it on, but he's going to be a 5'40" guy, coming off the edge. That doesn't work if he's 285 pounds. Can he go and be an outside linebacker and just think, I'm not comparing him to TJ Watt, but TJ Watt plays outside linebacker. TJ Watt's 260 pounds. He can also drop in coverage. Can Brendan Mott do that? I think there's a possibility. So, I think he's got the want to be able to do it. Now, there's other things that come involved in that. But, I think he's got the potential to be able to do that. And so there's going to be other guys that you don't know. You just don't know.
I agree. Gills?
Hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. And I know that there's players like Jordy Nelson and, Bill Snyder's teams fit, the Big B's 97, 98 team, 15 pros. I get all that, but like Bill Snyder's success was built around finding those guys that maybe aren't the best players and just beating you with hard work and out physicaling your opponents, right, Big B? So no,
it's hard for me to say because when we were there, we were talented. I mean, So while I get that premise, I'm not saying that you're wrong, because hard work will absolutely beat talent if talent doesn't work hard. But those teams and a lot of Coach Snyder's team, you're not going 11-1 if you don't have a bunch of talented guys. And Kansas State did that several years. You're not winning 10 and 11 games if you don't have a bunch of talented guys. Right. It's just not possible to do that in college football. Not in that time frame or even 2002, 3, 4. You're just not winning those type of games or that many games unless you have a bunch of talented football players. Now, don't get me wrong. You also build your program. That Kansas State built their program on finding guys that maybe weren't recruited as high. But I think Jordy Nelson is a horrible example. And I'm not saying you in particular, Gills, but I think Jordy Nelson is a horrible example. Jordy Nelson was always talented. He was always athletic. Just people didn't go find him to recruit him. That's all. The talent was always there. He just came from a small place and nobody just saw him and looked at him. So you were able to find him. That happens sometimes. Guys fall through the cracks. But you got to have talented players to be able to win those kinds of games. It can't all just be a bunch of hard workers that are out kicking their talent. You're not going to win that many games like that. Not consistently.
Agreed.
Yeah, good point.
Look at Army. Nobody's working harder than Army and Navy and Air Force. Nobody's working harder than those guys. But they are having a good year this year. But when was the last time Army and Navy have consistently won 9-10 games?
True.
I guess let me spin it in a different way. How many, like Tyler Lockett, is kind of the only pro that DJ Reed, I guess I should, but other than that, there's really not that many bona fide dudes in the NFL. There's, the K-State in the NFL piece I do on Go Powercat every week it's loaded with guys, but a good, little chunk of them, Khalid Duke and Adrian Martinez, are practice squad guys. And, I know Josh Hayes had the big fumble recovery on Monday Night Football, but, Cody Whitehair, I know at the Raiders he's struggled, right? So
right.
Just because you're getting NFL talent, sure, that might be a good measuring stick, but let's not act like as of right now, K-State's 2022 team, if it had NFL talent, well, Skylar Thompson is a backup in Miami, right? It's not like they're bona fide starters.
Good point.
No, starters is different, but I would say if you play in the NFL 4 or 5 years, you're doing pretty good.
Yep.
The lifespan of an NFL player is 3, and you're looking at a guy that didn't even make a squad. So, and I was pretty good in college. So it's different. So I would say if you're there, you're pretty good. It's tough to stay. Don't get me wrong. It is tough to stay. But you're right. You're absolutely right, Gills. Not bona fide starters, but as long as you can hang around, I mean, and not to mention you make a pretty good living.
But the travel's hard. That's it for this edition of the Powercat Podcast. We appreciate you listening or watching or getting this over your personal telegraph. We'll be back next week with a full slate of podcasts because we don't have a pregame podcast. We don't have a Friday walkthrough, I don't think, this week. Maybe they're doing one. I'm not sure. This is my last podcast. That's all that matters to me. You guys can do podcasts, but I'm done. Thanks for watching.
This has been a GoPowerCat.com and Spirit Street production. Please support this show by subscribing to this YouTube channel or follow us on your favorite podcast platform.